Hey, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Havdalah. It is so great to see everybody here via little chat. We're so glad to have you. If you're watching for the first time, we are super glad you're here. If you're not in the DFW area, please let us know where you're watching from. We're just so happy you're here, and we hope you have a great evening tonight. After the announcements, Pastor Greg Rosenberg will bring us another great teaching on the Shema. And then our special guest, Dr. Jeffrey Seif, will be teaching us the second in our two-part series on Jewish masculinity. Please join us for a 30-minute Zoom Oneg or fellowship at 7 p.m. following Havdalah every Saturday. It's a great time of community. The link is in the Havdalah event post in both Facebook and YouTube. Speaking of community, if you're watching alone, we would encourage you to consider doing a watch party, or maybe watching with your small group so that you can continue to have some community while we're still socially restricted. If you're watching as a family or a group, please let us know in the chat area. We would love to hear from you. If you belong to the Gateway family, please make sure you're completing Growth Path, especially if you are a current volunteer or would like to volunteer, and especially in light of we're going to be having services here pretty soon, so we need you. Gateway is still encouraging community via virtual groups, but existing groups are now able to meet in person. Yay! There is a 10-person limit, and you will need to practice recommended guidelines. Don't think I need to go over that. We've got it committed to memory by now. All existing group leaders should have been contacted with the details. If you have not been contacted, please see your section leader and they can get that to you. If you would please consider leading a Jewish group, we would love that. We would love for you to take the wonderful teachings that you have heard and sharing them with others who may not know about the Jewish roots of their faith. You can have a Shabbat group, or you can take all of our video teachings, social media, Gateway Resource Library, or even past sermons, and have a discussion group or a small study group. Super easy. I have one. If I can do it, you can do it. Please go to gatewaypeople.com/groups to sign up. Our next Shabbat service, yay, will be broadcast on July 10th. And yes, it's online, but just hold on. We're coming. Pastor Wayne Wilkes will be bringing a great message on God Still Hears Ishmael, so you won't want to miss it. Get ready, you all. We have Night of Worship coming Sunday, the June 28th. It'll be our first event on campus. Registration is required. That registration will open up at 6 p.m. tomorrow, June 21st. So if you want to jump on that, go to gatewaypeople.com, scroll about halfway down through the webpage, look for the little box on the right that says Night of Worship, and it'll have a link in there for you to click on. If you have a need or a prayer request, please take advantage of Gateway's desire to care for you by texting CONNECT to 71010. And now, Pastor Greg Rosenberg is going to bring us another great Shema teaching.
Hey, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, as Mel said. It's good to see you, although I wish I could see you in person. I'm just so excited I have the gift of impatience, I'll be honest with you. And I'm so looking forward to getting together with you all in person to worship the Lord. And so Krisha and I, we had to go up to Walmart today because there's a FedEx inside. And I had to ship a box. And I just noticed there's so many people everywhere. And it just made my heart long even more to get together with you guys in person at Gateway, our amazing church. So I miss you guys. I look forward to getting together. We have a great program for you this evening. After me, my pastor, Greg Stone, will come and share testimony. And then Dr. Jeff Seif will come and give us a teaching. I'm so looking forward to that. So let's do, happy Father's Day to everybody. And let's do the Shema together. And so I'm going to just say it. So say it with me. I hope you can see the screen. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod, Machluto Leolam Va'ed. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. B'chol levavcha, u'v'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol meodecha. V'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavcha. V'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvleftecha, v'derech uvshachtam uvkumecha, ukshartam laot al yadecha, v'hayu latotafot bein einecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot, beitecha uvish arecha. Whew. And together we say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Blessed be the name of his kingdom, his glorious kingdom forever and ever. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words I command you today shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall speak of them when you sit at home and when you walk along the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. So, get back here. I wanted to talk about the last two verses, and what I have here is my talit bag, and Jewish boys get these for sure when they're bar mitzvah, if not before. And inside the talit bag is a talit, but also there's a tefillin bag. And inside the tefillin are what's called phylacteries or tefillin, and there's usually two. There is two. And I want to talk about these for a second. So one of these we wrap around our foreheads, and the other we wrap around our arm, and it'll go up here, which is right next to our heart. And the idea is that the worshiper will say the morning prayers with his attention directed to his head, then his heart and his hand. And because these are located right next to the heart, that includes the heart. And in this way, the worshiper, the one that's praying, is dedicating himself to the service of God and all that he thinks and all that he feels and all that he does. So when you see the word phylacteries or tefillin, it's these black boxes. And so that's what those look like. Now, verse 9, and that ties in with verse 8, tie them as symbols upon your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Now, verse 9 says, write them on the doorpost of your houses and on your gates. And so with that, I want to show you, and I hope you can see this. Hold on one second here. Fix this. And so right here is a mezuzah that's hanging on the doorpost of my home. And this one has special meaning to me because it was given by a Holocaust survivor in Israel. And the idea here is in all mezuzahs, the Shema is written in there, certainly Deuteronomy 6:4 through 9. And in other, and then in many mezuzahs, there are Torah readings from Numbers chapter 11 that are in there as well. They're written on a parchment in Hebrew, of course. And so the idea is that when we're coming into our homes and when we're leaving our homes, we're taking the Torah with us. It's part of our lives when we're at home, when we leave. God's instructions, his directions always are a part of our lives. And it's interesting, many Gentiles today are also putting up mezuzahs in their door. I think it's very cool. And it reminds me of the verse where in Joshua 24:15, and Joshua says, as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. So I just wanted to share that with you about the Shema this week. Thanks for joining in with us today. And God bless you. Again, I just miss you guys in person. And now I want to hand you off to Pastor Greg Stone.
Thanks, Pastor Greg. We're blessed to have Pastor Greg Rosenberg with us. And Melody has it easy because she's got two Pastor Gregs, Greg Rosenberg and Greg Stone. But we're blessed. I just appreciate Greg Rosenberg so much. He's such a learner and such a lover of people. and he likes to share what he learns with people and to grow. He's a grower, and we're just blessed. I just wanted to publicly affirm him. Normally, I'm doing the teaching, and since we have a guest speaker, I wanted to take the opportunity to actually share a testimony with you. And actually, I think I'll share the first, a very short testimony, and then one that's a little bit longer. The first testimony actually comes from when I became a grandfather. And I remember the very first time when I was there, my daughter wanted me in the room when her firstborn was born, which is different for a lady to want her father in there, but she wanted me in there, and I was there, and Daniel was born. And when Daniel was born, they handed the baby to me. And I remember the very first time I held this baby in my hand, and I remember for the first time in my life feeling legacy. I felt like, wow, legacy. And I realized something. 25 years ago, I had my first kid. Now I'm holding my first grandkid. And the questions, the desires, the interests, the motivations of a man 25 years later is so much different than a man 25 years younger, because we grow and we develop, and the challenges of life, and they're entirely different when you're 50 than they are when you're 25. And so I want to encourage you, men, never stop growing. Always make it your goal to grow. The other thing I want to share with you today for just a few moments is just another testimony about the distinctness of being a father. Now, last week I shared about masculinity, and in a few moments, Dr. Saif will talk about masculinity. But let me suggest to you here momentarily that it is politically correct to suggest that moms provide something very unique, that men cannot provide, and no one questions that. For example, moms nurse. And men can't do that, right? And it's politically, though, incorrect in much of the world, certainly in America, to suggest that fathers might provide something unique, just as unique coming from the man as what comes from the woman. It's politically correct to suggest that there's a time in a person's life where they really need their mother. That first year or two of life while that baby's being nursed, and they need that cuddling, and men can't provide that. Well, doesn't it make sense then that if there's a time that God made it so that a baby uniquely needs the gifts that come from a mother, that there might be a time when there are a child growing up uniquely needs something from their father? And we've all seen statistics. I shared a bunch of them last week. The chances of a man going to prison, it goes up much higher if he grows up without a father. And there's all kinds of other things that go on in our lives when we grow up fatherless. What do fathers provide, and when do they provide it? Let me suggest to you that, and there is a difference. The old saying, he has a face, or she has a face that only a mother could love. Nobody ever says that about the father. Okay. Mothers provide a certain kind of affirmation, a certain kinds of love, a certain kind of affection, and fathers provide something else. So I want to tell you a story, but before I tell you the story, I need to brag on one of my sons, because one of my sons, I have 4 sons and a daughter, and I love them all. I'm proud of them all. But today I want to talk about one of them in particular, Michael. And I am so proud of Michael, because he has done so many things so well in his life. He grew. He became a great man. He's a great husband. He's a great son. He calls me all the time. He demonstrates real interest in his dad and his mom. He's a great man of faith. He's on worship teams. He leads his family in the Shabbat every Friday night. He has a strong work ethic, very strong, and he knows how to take time off of work and to play with his family. He has demonstrated a tremendous decision in his life to turn his life around in ways that very few men do, and that has made me extremely proud of him. Now, I'm not sharing this story that I'm telling you right now because I think I've done so well, because I don't think I handled something as well in his life as I should have, or could have, or should have. But I share this as an example simply to show that men can provide something that sometimes women are not as readily going to be willing to provide. There was a time in my son's life when he was testing every boundary. If you gave him a boundary, he tested it. If the police gave him a boundary, he would test it. He wasn't doing drugs, he wasn't doing alcohol, but it was a financially dishonest lifestyle. And it was grievous to Donna and to me. And I don't want to go into any examples. I don't need to, but I can tell you that there were multiple examples of it, and they were wrong and they were illegal, and it was repeated over and over again. And so finally, I reached the point. I said, I've really got to do something. So I went to the treasurer of our church. I was the lead pastor, and the treasurer is the president of a bank. And I told him what I knew. And I said, I really think as a father, I really think I need to help my son find jail so that he really learns this lesson. Because I'd rather he learn it when he's 22 than when he's 24. Right. And because it was evident, it was just very illegal what he was doing. And so the treasurer of our church, Brad, he agreed. And he said, I really, it seemed like the right decision. And so I went to my wife and I said, Donna, I really feel like as a father, this is my responsibility. And she said, no, she was totally not into it. And to this day, she wouldn't do it. But she will, she, after the event happened, well, what happened was when my son realized that I actually was serious about this, he turned himself into Teen Challenge. Not because he had a problem. Many of you will know what Teen Challenge is. He didn't have a problem with drugs. He didn't have a problem with alcohol. But his issue was testing boundaries. And he put himself in this program so that he would learn how to live a disciplined life. And he did. And he finished their program. And then he did their ministry program. And while there were through some ministry that was connected with the program, he met a lady who became his wife, and they ended up getting married, and now they have 3 kids. He named his firstborn son after me. I would consider Mike my best friend. He would consider me his best friend. We love each other. We talk all the time. I remember after this was all over, when Mike had really turned his life around, and I said to Donna, Donna, tell me something, because you really didn't agree with what I did. But do you think that Mike would be where he's at today if I had not, if he had not gone to Teen Challenge? And she said, no, there's no way. And I said, well, do you think he would have gone to Teen Challenge if I hadn't been so like direct on this issue? And she said, no, but there's no way I would do it anyway. I still don't agree with it. But Mike agrees with it. And Mike considers me his best friend. I consider him my best friend, like all my kids. But it just, I'm so proud of him for the way he turned his life around. And I tell this story only to say, man, there's something about fathers. You see, God gave us the ability to make tough decisions, broad shoulders. But not only the ability, he gave us a call. We are called to be the leaders of our family, to be loving leaders. Our wives are called to be the leading lovers, but we are called to be loving leaders, to be compassionate people who will make tough choices and lead our families. Now, I want to introduce to you one of the greatest loving leaders that I have ever met, Dr. Seif. And by the way, if you didn't download the notes for today's teaching, I encourage you to do that. It's in the Facebook link, and you can download them, and you'll be able to take notes because there's fill in the blanks. I met Dr. Seif for the first time when I was a student at TKU working on my doctoral degree that he actually was. He taught a couple of the courses that I was in. Many of you will know of the TLV Bible. Well, he was the project manager for the entire Bible. When Zola Levitt passed away about, I'm going to say 6 years ago, I think that's when it was, Dr. Seif became the person who replaced Zola Levitt on his show. The show is no longer called the Zola Levitt Show. Now it's called Our Jewish Roots. And Dr. Seif is on the Daystar Network, and he's on TBN. He is a great example, I think, of what a man should be. When I had him at our church in St. Peter, I introduced him and said, this is the finest example, as fine an example as I know of what it means to be a man. He is smart. He stays fit. He is a leader. He's funny. I remember sitting in class in TKU and laughing so hard that I was literally crying in class as I'm trying to learn, but I was laughing so hard. He and his wife, Barry, ride Harleys, and they're really into that. And Dr. Seif's actually into ballroom dancing too. So that's kind of like he's just a learner, right? And one of the things about him that really stands out is Dr. Seif is the commander of one of the 2 police academies in the city of Dallas. So he's actually a leader of leaders, a leader in an area that we really, I believe that we need to love and respect our police. And while there might be there are a few bad, there's always a few bad apples, but the police, I think, are to be honored. And he is the most honorable one that I've ever met. And so with that in mind, let me welcome Dr. Seif. And I warn you now, he is, the most honorable one that I've ever met. And so with that in mind, let me welcome Dr. Seif. And I warn you now, he is the most honorable one that I've ever met. And so with that in mind, let me welcome Dr. Seif. And I warn you now, he is the most honorable one that I've ever met. And so with that in mind, let me welcome Dr. Seif. And I warn you now, he is He is funny. I don't know how much he'll joke, but if I know him, he's going to joke, and he'll have fun, and you'll have fun. And Dr. Seif, I love you. Oh, I also want to tell people, you are the lead rabbi of Sar Shalom in Arlington, Texas. Your services are Friday at 7:00, and people should visit your congregation. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Stone, Pastor Greg. I'm really thrilled. My wife, Barry, and I just love what all of you guys are all about. And we were hugging and praying together before the service, before coming on here, just thanking God for all of you, your ministry. We love Gateway. We love you all personally. And I'm honored personally that you would give me some space here and that you would think as highly of me as you do to be able to speak to foreign about manhood. Last night when we were retiring for the evening, Barry asked me what the title of my talk was going to be this evening. And I forgot. I didn't know. I says, I can get up and go look it up. And the reason is, it's not like I have some canned spiel on manhood, some speech that I've given 30 times before, and I'm just whipping out that old one. I think when you cook food, you can tell something that's been in the freezer for a year and something that's been in the crock pot for a day, slowly burning. And this is one of those slow burns. And, I came up with the title at the tail end of it all, and I forgot it last night when I was going to bed. I wanted to speak to a subject in the interest of speaking to men. And in doing that, I was endeavoring to be true to what Dr. Stone wanted. Certainly, it's a Father's Day weekend, it's appropriate. And as you'll hear me to say, authentic manhood, it seems to me, is in such very high demand and such very short supply in our culture. The subtitle of this is very professorial in nature. And I'm more the professor than the pastor. It's not that I don't have any heart, but I'm more predisposed to come from the head, just 30 years being a teacher. I wanted to speak to foreign about Paul's adaptation of offensive Greco-Roman motifs. It might not seem so prima facie face value, but Paul gave voice to things that would have been construed as scandalous in his day and time. We read Paul, 2,000 years afterward. But I'm particularly interested in, when I open up the New Testament, I agree with Wayne Meeks, a professor at Yale, who says we retroject back in time 2,000 years. And I want to climb back into that world with you. And I made some notes here, some fill in the blank. It's really professorial, but it is what it is. I just figured I would do it. I want to speak first about what I refer to as Paul's employment of Greco-Roman images in the New Testament. Now, Paul was a member of the Parushim, Pharisees, and it comes from the Hebrew parush, which means to be separate from. To be sure, 100 years before Calvary, give or take, Judea was annexed as a Roman holding, and it came into the Roman fold. And there were many people that chafed against the Romanization of the culture, even centuries beforehand with Alexander the Great. People were chafing against assimilation and the inculcation of Greek ways and beings into Judean society. And the Parushim, the Pharisees, were separatists. They were resisting of all of that. And Paul cut his teeth as an early theologian as part of that resistance movement. Started off very noble, very good, in fact. And mindful of that, it's interesting to me to see Paul being very comfortable using images when he speaks that would have framed the senses and sensibilities of his more pious Jewish hearers. I'm looking at a few passages in particular in my notes, and I raised the question rhetorically, and I want to spend a moment and look at these passages. Prima facie, they don't seem problematic, and I'll explain to you why they are. And then I'll kind of dig a little further into it and how these things might speak to, for, and about manhood. But first, I asked the question, what of 1 Corinthians 9, verses 24 and 6, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, and Ephesians chapter 6, verses 11 and on have in common? Before answering the question, I just want to look at the texts and read it. Personally, it's a pet peeve of mine. I think Bible teachers spend too little time teaching the Bible. You know, someone speaks for 45 minutes, they quote a verse for 45 seconds, and then they say what they want to say. I think what the Bible says in and of itself is more important than what I might happen to say about it. But I want to look at it with you with a fresh set of eyes, if you would. I want to just read these texts to you. In 1 Corinthians, I'm interested in chapter 9, verse 24. Do you not know that in a stadium the runners all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. He goes on to say, every competitor exercises self-control in all respects. They do it to receive a perishable crown, but we do it to receive an imperishable one. So I run in this way, not aimlessly. So I box in this way, not beating the air. Rather, I punish my body and bring it into submission so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified. We hear him using images from sports, sporting. He talks about stadium runners. He talks about winning a prize. He talks about a crown. It's a laurel wreath that was given at the time as opposed to a gold or silver crown. He speaks about boxing. Elsewhere he speaks about we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Now he's using language from athletics. What I want you to understand on the front end is Jews eschewed Hellenistic culture with its athletic competition. Even the word gym, today someone says, I'm going to the gym. The word gym in Greek means in the nude, because when they attended these sporting things, they did it in their birthday suits. And the Parushim, the Pharisees, were very resistant to Greco-Roman culture and certain aspects of it. For example, here we're looking at athletics that were born, athletic competitions. The Olympics is something that came out of the Greeks. Paul here now is using images from that, and he's analogizing to the Christian life. This could conceivably grate against the sensibilities of some. I want to look at another example, if you will. In the Corinthian correspondence, he's writing to a group. When he speaks to Timothy in what we call 2 Timothy, he's writing to an individual. And if you look in chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, herein, this is he knows he's about to die in reasonably short order. And he says here, he's writing from being imprisoned himself. He was jacked up by the police and he knew he wasn't getting out. He says here in verse 7, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course of the race. Now here again, two illustrations from athletics, fighting the fight and finishing the race. He says, I've kept the faith. In the future, there is reserved for me a crown of righteousness. And here again, Stephanos in the Greek, it's not to be confused with a regal crown, gold, silver, bejeweled. It's this laurel wreath. It's the crown of being awarded for winning an athletic competition. He says, I fought the fight, I finished the race. Hence, there is this reward laid up in store for me. Here again, we're looking at an example that's akin to what he said when he spoke to the Corinthians, where he's employing language from Greco-Roman culture that's antithetical to pietistic Jewish culture, and he's using that to illustrate something about the walk with the Messiah. I want to look at one more example, please, in Ephesians chapter 6. And here, he's not just using language from Greco-Roman athletic competition, but here he's using the image of a Roman legionnaire. And he is extrapolating from this. He's analogizing from the accoutrements of a Roman soldier to make a spiritual point. And let's just hear the text first. And what I want to do is look at it with Jewish eyes, with a fresh sense of eyes on the front end, just to understand how odd it is. And I want to introduce you to that on the front end and raise questions associated with it and then answer it. He says, as he's finishing up when he's writing to the Ephesians, in chapter 6, verse 10, finally be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God. He goes on in verse 12, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, powers, worldly forces of darkness, and against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. I remember once when reading Paul, when he says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and I thought, that's easy for him to say. He's not a police officer. I can assure you, I've had opportunity to wrestle with flesh and blood, but it's what comes subsequent to that in verse 13. He's already said, put on the armor. And here again, he says, therefore take up the full armor of God. And he's going to look at the particulars. Now, the armor in Greek, hapla, speaks of the full attachment of armor that a soldier would wear. And it harks back to the Greeks. The hoplite soldier is what they were called. And this evolved then into the Roman legionnaire. He's saying, put this full armor on. Take up the full armor. And then he says, as I go on, therefore take up the full armor so that you may be able to resist in the times that are evil. And when you've done everything to stand, stand firm, buckle the belt of truth around your waist, put on the breastplate of righteousness. Now here's a police officer, I'll wear a Kevlar vest. They had breastplates. Put on the breastplate of righteousness, strap up your feet in readiness for the good news of shalom. Above all, take up the shield of faith, with you're able to stand and extinguish the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Here again, as I noted, he's taking the accoutrements of a Roman soldier. So we hear Paul, just for these texts at the outset. I asked the question, what do these texts have in common? My answer is, they all employ Hellenistic and Greco-Roman motifs common to the military and to athletics. I'll tell you why I think that's important in a moment, but I'd like to move on and raise a question. Could some critique Rabbi Paul, and I like to refer to him as Rabbi Paul, some Saint Paul, the Apostle Paul, if you're a Baptist, Brother Paul, if you're a Catholic, maybe Father Paul, Apostle Paul, whatever. I like Rabbi Paul because Paul was an Orthodox Jewish rabbi who came to faith, and he lived as a Jew till the day he died. People come up to me, they say, how long have I been a converted Jew? And I say, I'm not a converted Jew, I'm a converted sinner. It's not a sin to be a Jew. I like kind of pressing the point. Could some critique Rabbi Paul from using images from Greco-Roman culture that grate against Pharisaic sensibilities? Well, the answer is yes, of course. Judeans who were displeased by Roman occupation, remember occupying forces in Judea, again, Judea was annexed as a Roman holding by political intrigue, and it was held by dint of determination. Back in Judea, the average Jewish bear in Yellowstone Park wasn't particularly enthused by Roman presence. By way of contradistinction here, Paul uses the imagery of a Roman legionnaire to speak to a population. Now, to be sure, he's not speaking in Judea. He's writing to the Ephesians. In one case, Ephesus was one of the largest cities in the Greco-Roman world at the western edge of Turkey today, what we call Turkey. And when Paul writes to the Corinthians, Corinth is right at the top of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. It's what extends toward the southernmost parts of Greece. We leave the mainland in Macedonia and go to Achaia, what we call the Peloponnesian Peninsula, and Corinth is there. So Paul, Though he was Jewish, he didn't have an Israeli passport. Paul himself was from Tarsus, which is southeastern Turkey today, and he was very much a man of the world, comfortable in Greco-Roman culture, so much so when he writes to Jews that have come to faith and Gentiles that are part of his communities in these places, he very comfortably uses Greco-Roman imagery. Here, however, the Greco-Roman soldier, the imagery could grate against Pharisaic sensibilities because some would be displeased, of course, by the Roman occupation and could take issue with his using the soldier's paraphernalia in order to make religious points. He's doing that. You say, okay, Jeffrey, he's doing it, but so what? What's your point? You're supposed to be doing a Father's Day gig, masculinity, it's wake up and smell the coffee, baby. What does this have to do with the moment? Well, give me a second here. That we see that he's using soldiering paraphernalia to make religious points. Similarly, devout Jews could take issue with his using images from Greco-Roman sporting, something as well that arguably could be very offensive to Jewish senses and sensibilities. Now, having observed that, in fact, Paul uses imagery that we wouldn't expect, now that you think about it, if you agree with me, and you can feel free to not agree with me. You don't have to, but thank you for at least giving me a hearing and, for 15 minutes more, and then I'll get out of Dodge. I'm glad that Dr. Stone and Pastor Greg and the team is pleased to let me come and share. If you've observed with me that Rabbi Paul does in fact use military language and sporting language, and with that, if you can understand how that might not entirely comport with Jewish sensibilities, then you can perhaps go on the journey with me to ask, secondly, why does Paul employ Greco-Roman images in the New Testament? Why does he do it? My answer is rather simple. He employs them because they speak to men. Men. That is to say, men appreciate struggle. Little boys grow up, they're competitive, they're athletic, they fight, they wrestle, they have those energies. Little boys grow up, playing with Roman soldiers, and even, God bless my wife, Barry, she has to put up with me, Reverend, Rabbi, Professor, Theologian Seif likes to watch war stuff as opposed to the proverbial chick flick. Now, I need to be more sensitive. I get that. And I do pivot to that. I really want to tune into my wife. She realizes, however, that I'm a different kind of creature. And if you look at Paul speaks to men. Now, I, by contrast, believe that in many ways today, churches have ceased speaking to men, and today speak almost exclusively to women. Now, you can feel free to disagree with me, and I don't have any problem with speaking to women. My best friend is a woman. My wife, Barry, Dr. Barry, is indeed my best friend, and I've got nothing against speaking to women. But I make a point here, the church, even the language. I remember someone asked me, don't you wish that God could just wrap his arms around you and show you his love? And I said, absolutely not. Quite frankly, I could care less. I don't even think in those terms. I'm not looking for assurance. I'm not looking for comfort. I'm not looking for precious Jesus to wrap his arms around me now and show me his love. And I just want to hear his voice and hear his heartbeat as I lean on his breast. Now, feel free to disagree with me. And you can say, well, Seif's got a lot of growing to do. And indeed, that's true. And my wife, who's listening, she tuned into Gateway. She might say, oh, did he say growing? Amen to that. I haven't claimed that I've arrived yet. But so much of culture, to feelings, to emotions, to felt needs, not that that's unimportant. Now, you might lose me on this. And again, you can feel free to disagree. I think one of the problems with men in today's culture is they spend too much time with women. You say, well, that sounds rather offensive, Jeffrey. Click, I'm signing out. Well, I'm a guest speaker. And for those that want to complain, that's why Dr. Stone is there to hear. And he'll be happy to hear what a mistake was made in having me come and speak. But again, you need not agree to me. The reason why I say, personally, that I think one of the problems of today's culture is that men spend too much time with women. If you look at it in the home, you have a lot of absentee fathers. And so what happens is the little boys are there with mom. And then they go to school. And then as they grow up in, early childhood and adolescence, it's around women, school teachers, not exclusively, but principally. And, where's the guiding hand in Jewish culture? It was the father who was responsible to raise a boy, to teach him a trade, to teach him the religion. There was that male imprint that Dr. Stone spoke about earlier. It's absent in so many ways, and that to me is problematic. It is. Men don't get enough of men. Boys don't get enough of men, and the language of the church, the appeal to feeling, felt need, etc. Not that that's unimportant, but it doesn't necessarily speak to men. I further believe that in many ways, today's sexually confused culture obscures and disparages male proclivities. In short, I believe that masculinity is headed for the endangered species list. I honestly believe that. Even the males with their energies, men, young boys have a lot more energies. Let's just throw Ritalin at them to calm them down. People don't know what to do with all that. Well, again, I think personally that there are issues in today's culture, which is why even if my approach to it is too in-your-face, draconian, and perchance patently offensive, and even if someone isn't inclined to agree with somewhat of the way that I am, nevertheless, I appreciate that Dr. Stone afforded me an opportunity to come up and share, because I believe that there needs to be something of a recovery. And to aid in that, by the way, if you want to look at a good Father's Day gift, and it's something that a woman could gift herself, just to understand the man in her life, not just her father, but her husband or her brother, or for a man to read. It's Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. Save the Bible itself. That was one of the best books that I ever read, because that Eldredge really explores manhood, and he does such a great job with it. Well, I want to put the landing gear down. I don't want to speak forever. I don't want to compete with the president, by the way, because I know I'll lose. And I want to hear what he has to say. But I want to speak briefly to some suggestions for Christian men, mindful of some of the ways that Paul speaks in the New Testament. And there are three things I'd like to leave with you, that whatever the recovery is for manhood, I think that this contributes with it. Number one, I believe that men do well to invigorate through dream pursuit, to go after the girl, to go after the success, to go after respect. There's no crime in all of that. The 3 G's, young men, they want to go after the gold, they want to be successful, the glory, and the girl. They have this energy, this oomph. And, I believe personally that men need to be given permission to go on the quest for a preferred future, to roll the dice against an uncertain future, to dream, to risk, to get out there. The males of the species have to compete in this world. And I believe that the males of the species are invigorated when we pursue the dreams. I've raised boys, not girls. And it's probably just as good, because, let's say I have a daughter and some boy comes to the house. Well, hi, Mr. Seif. Well, hi, what's your name? I love Johnny. What can I do for you, Johnny? well, Mr. Seif, I'm looking to, see if I can take your daughter out. Maybe we go out to a movie, And, okay, Johnny, well, tell me, what are you into in life? Well, I don't know, man. I'm just kind of like seeking the Lord to kind of figure out what it's all about. And, I mean, I get that, all of that, but I like men with some ambition, not just in pause and in limbo. And I got nothing against being spiritual and seeking the Lord. What's the Lord saying? There's so much withdrawal. There's so much disengagement. And to me, I find men are entirely too spacey and goofy and effeminate personally. Way too much of that perennial lostness. Well, I get lostness in adolescence, but there's this recovery phase. If I had a daughter, and I don't, I've raised sons. If I had a daughter, I'd want to know if she's going to give her hand to a man, who is that guy and where is he going? And I'd want her to be married to a real man, a godly man, a manly man, someone with dream, ambition, focus, dare, someone who's going somewhere in life. And males of the species get invigorated when they run the race, when they run the race, when they fight the fight, when they do what Paul's talking about. Secondly, I think important for malehood is not just to invigorate through dream pursuit, but to advocate for just causes. And I believe that's extremely important, to stand up for something. People look at that, standing up and being direct, they have a problem with it. I think personally, that's one of the problems that some in the culture have with our current president, who stands on his own 2 feet, who speaks his mind, he's very direct. People see it as dictatorial, overly authoritarian. They're not even used to being direct and forthright. I think people need to have something noble to throw their energies into. Males particularly are invigorated by that, to be a man. There's ways of being a man that a woman can't satisfy. That, oh, don't worry, I'll marry you, Johnny, and then, I know I'll be able to fix and heal everything. That's not true. It certainly is true to a certain extent. I'm like a crazy kite, and my wife is the tail that keeps me steady in the sky. I say of Barry, she's the way, the truth, and the wife. And I mean it every time I say it, that I don't know where I'd be without her. But I just couldn't be successful if all I had was her. That I need to be going after dreams. And we don't go out of business for that. If you're a man, go after dreams. I'm 64 and a half. I just got accepted at Cambridge University this next weekend. I'll be on an airplane. I'll be there for a month. I have to be there 6 times in the next 2 years to get a master's degree in applied criminology and police management. That's what I'm going after. I have a doctorate in ministry, theology, Southern Methodist University. I pursue knowledge. I go after stuff. I think that's important, to go after goals and dreams. I think it's important to be involved in just causes. I actually care. People look at cops, they call me a racist, this and that, but actually there's a lot of problems in this world. I want to be part of the cure. And I like to get involved in things that help humanity. And policing is the way that I do that. I volunteered it for over a decade before it ever turned into any part-time or full-time career or anything. I did it just for the love of doing it. In addition to being a chaplain, I wanted to help the police as a chaplain. I went to the police academy and I went from there. Crazy dreams. Men need to have permission to pursue their crazies. I want to say lastly that thirdly, not only should men invigorate by going after dreams, in my opinion, and not only should they advocate, they need a just cause, a reason to be, they also should associate with noble men and dissociate from ignoble men. You have a teenager shows up, you have a teenage son, and you want to see what's going to become of him in life. Just see who he hangs out with. Just see who he hangs out with. You hang out with the wrong kind of people, bad character ruins good morals. Just see who they're hanging out with. I think that we need to associate, to be a man, to associate with men. I think men need men. It's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that Dr. Stone says, hey, listen, Jeff, you just take your liberty and weigh in and, just give your 2 cents about where you think the chips fall relative to manhood. I think men need men. And I think men need more than this. That is a video conference, a Zoom gig. I get it. It's all good. We're all making the best of less than perfect circumstances, but we need to get together. Men need to get together with guys, and people need to get together. We're communal creatures. No man's an island. no man's alone, that we derive strength by virtue of being in a community where we can share our gifts, where we can give and receive love and caring and sharing and mutual appreciation and respect. That is so important for the males of the species. Listen, if you're listening to me online, great. If that's the best you could do, I get that. But you want to get yourself to a place of worship because you want to be discovered. Never mind discovering me. Okay, Jeffrey Sipe, maybe you think I'm cool, maybe you don't. Who cares? You know, you've had an opportunity to find out what I'm all about. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. But people need to find out what you're all about. And you don't get that in isolation. There's a way that we give and we receive. It's all about community. And I think association is important, advocation is important, and invigoration is important through continuing to learn and grow. Well, those are my, throwing a few perspectives into the mix. Again, Dr. Stone, thank you so much for affording me the opportunity to share. Gateway family, thank you for putting up with me for 35 minutes. I shared, it's the way I see it. These opinions are my own. Feel free to disagree, but thank you for giving me here, and God bless.
Dr. Sipe, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Friends, there's so many things that I just like my mind, he stimulates my thinking in so many ways, but there's a couple of things that I just thought I'd just share with you. You know, he was talking here, Dr. Sipe was talking about how men need men. And some of you will find this interesting. You know, I studied counseling and psychology for a number of years. And obviously, you know that in the modern day, there is this prevailing idea that people were born gay, that this is a predisposition, that we're born that way. Well, let me tell you, without me even going into that debate now, let me tell you what was the prevailing idea in psychology before the notion of people were born that way. Do you know what the prevailing idea was? Men grew up without having had a good relationship with their father. And as a result of not having a good relationship with a man, they became hungry for male relationship. That was the almost universal idea in psychology before the idea arose that people were born being gay. Kind of an interesting thought. So, one other thing I just want to share with you. Dr. Sipe mentioned this book, Wild at Heart, and it is a fantastic book by John Eldredge. And one of the things that he talks about in the book, it's the same thing that Dr. Sipe was talking about, this idea that men were born with this sense of a need to be a warrior. And that we have effeminated everything. And thank God for women. I mean, you know, God says to a man, if you don't love your wife more than any other woman, more than any other person on the planet, he goes, I won't answer your prayers the same way. 1 Peter 3:7. So he calls us to love our wives, but he calls us to be men. And when Jesus comes back to the earth, as John Eldredge brings up, when Jesus comes back to the earth, he's not coming back as some mamby-pamby kind of Peter Pan. He's coming back as a warrior. And some of you will now be streaming with me in thought, because lately I've been talking about many of the Adonai or Jehovah names that we find in the scripture. For example, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider, Adonai Jireh, the Lord our provider, appears once in all the Bible. Or Jehovah Adonai, or Jehovah Rapha, the Lord our healer, or Jehovah Shalom, the Lord our peace, Jehovah Roi, the Lord our shepherd, Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is there. All these names appear in the scripture just once. Jehovah Sidkenu appears twice, the Lord our righteousness. Jehovah Mikadesh, the Lord our sanctification, appears 4 times. But Adonai Tsavaot, or Jehovah Tsavaot, appears 101 times. 101 times, like 10 times more than all the other names combined. And what does that name mean? The Lord of the armies. Friend, God wants men to be making a difference, to be striving forward, to be pressing onward, to be creating something, to be people of change. And I'm watching the time here because I know we're going to have a Zoom conversation in 20 minutes on at the Zoom link, and you can go there. But last week I talked about the corpus callosum that connects the two sides of the brain and the electrical fiber, and how in men it's a lot smaller. So men will tend to be either more left brain or more right brain, and tend to not share information as much between the two sides. And sometimes women will joke and call us Bane bramaged. Because we're one side or the other, where women have this a much larger corpus callosum connecting the two halves of the brain. And they can tell with 100% accuracy every single time during an autopsy if it's a male or a female by looking at nothing other than the brain, the corpus callosum. You see, what God did was he made women more likely to consider all these different factors, and he made men more likely to be the kind of person who becomes, I'm just thinking about this one thing, and they're driving. They're pushing towards something. He equipped us. He made us to be leaders, to push in a certain direction, and then calls us to listen to our wives who are more global and more understanding of the things going on around us. But he put that man in charge of the family. He said, now you be the leader, and I've equipped you for it. Make those hard decisions, and you can do it. And men, you can do it. You can rise to the occasion of being a man. And in scripture, there are people who are put in positions of authority, and there are people in positions of influence. And whenever God wants to talk, he'll talk usually to the person in the position of influence before he'll talk to the person in the position of authority. So when he talks to husbands and wives in Ephesians, he talks to the wives first, and then he talks to the husbands. But he gives 3 times as many verses in Ephesians 5 to the man as he does, as he does to the woman, because he holds the man accountable. But he talks first to the wife, position of influence versus position of authority. And then when he talks to fathers and children, he talks first to the children and then to the fathers. Who does he hold accountable? The fathers. And then when he talks to masters and slaves, he talks to the slaves first and then the masters. So he talks to the person in the position of influence first and then the person in the position of authority. But who is held accountable? The person in the position of authority. When he wants to talk to a king, he talks to a prophet, person of influence, to a person in authority. You see, that's the way the Lord does it. And so, men, you have been placed in the position of authority, a position of leadership. And he's called you as men to be leaders in your family and in your world, and to relate with other leaders. And so I'm so thankful for Dr. Seif and for the wisdom with which he shared here today. We're very blessed. And I pray that that all of you have a great Father's Day. Love on the men in your life. Yes, men care about affection, but we care more about respect. We care more about honor. You see, it's that leadership component. Men do care about affection. I want to feel loved, but I care more about respect. I care more about honor, and that's the way God made men. With that in mind, men, I want you to know you are important. You make a difference in your world. You are far more important than you will ever even realize. You are significant. And I want to bless all of the men and all of the women and all of the children now with the Aaronic benediction. So let's look to the Lord as we close, and we'll look forward to meeting you next week. Next week, we're going to have Israel Pakhtar with us from Beit Hillel, who's is a pastor in Israel. And I know you're going to be blessed. But let's look to the Lord. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav alecha v'hunecha, Yisar Adonai panav alecha v'yasem lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, give you shalom. In the name of the Prince of Peace. Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov. Have a great week. Love you guys.